Welcome back. In today's episode, we continue the interview with David Burkus. Modeling is great advice, but it might not be the best advice. Stay tuned.
Welcome to this edition of Peak Performance Podcast with your host, Thor Conklin. Thor will be sharing the necessary tools, strategies, and psychology you'll need to become a peak performer in any area of your life or business.
Thor Conklin here. We give you the tricks, the tips, the tools, the strategy, the technology, and the psychology peak performers use in order to get more done and execute at the highest level. If you know what to do but struggle with getting it all done, or simply want to raise your game to the next level, this podcast is for you. Sit back and enjoy. Now, on the flip side, what's the worst advice you've ever received, but you didn't know that it was, and you implemented it anyway?
So man, this is going to be mean because I have no way of explaining this without naming actual companies. So when I graduated as an undergrad, I went. I had a goal. My wife was in medical school, and I had the long-term goal of being a writer. I knew I was going back to grad school, but I had a wife who wanted to go to med school and got into med school. So the priority was, okay, I'm going to provide for us to eat while she's in school, and then I'll flip and I get to go back. And so I spent 4 years I spent 5 years actually in the pharmaceutical industry. But before that, I was trying to break into said industry. And I took lots and lots of people's advice, and all of their advice was, here's like 5 companies that you should go to work for, because if you can survive in these companies, then you'll get recruited into the pharma companies. And so I interviewed for several different companies as an undergrad, and I found one that was a really sort of strong cultural fit. Right? It was really good. I clicked with them. They clicked with me, but they weren't on this list that everybody said were the 5 companies that you're supposed to go to work for to be a drug rep. And so I didn't take their offer. They had a really good offer. And I didn't take it because I took one from the company that's going to be on that list. Right? Now, by a totally coincidental event that had nothing to do with me choosing to work for that company, about 2 months into working for them, I got a call from a manager in a sales organization, pharmaceutical sales organization, that saw my resume before I worked at the company, right? So I had no idea that I went to work for this company. And I'm so glad that he found it just like sitting in his, email inbox sent over from somebody, because I was miserable. I was totally miserable at this other firm. And the idea that I would have to work there for a year, 18 months, 2 years in order to get a good reputation, get some good numbers, and then apply was just like, I was probably a week from quitting because I was that miserable. And so the broader piece of that advice is not just about don't work at this company or don't work at this company. It's that people give you experience on what you're supposed to do based on what they've done. And the fact that they're alive and like themselves means that they're a genius when they give you advice on what should work for you. Well, just because it worked for them doesn't mean it's good advice for you. By all ways you can measure it, I turned down the right job offer and I took the wrong one because I was listening to other people's ways. And it ended up not mattering in the end, right? Because I had a path that ended up working out, right? So that's the big lesson is when people give you advice, that's great. You should get a lot of different advice, but you should understand that they're giving you advice based on what worked for them. And there's no guarantee you can replicate that because you're not them.
Yes. And I think times and situations change so quickly now. I think back when I first got into the job market, things just seem to move at a different pace. Now it's crazy. A matter of fact, I even got a notice from my first employer that my pension is ready. I was like, wow, my pension.
Wow, that'll make you feel old.
Exactly. That's when there was no email, no copiers. I guess there was copiers, yeah, but there was no email. And matter of fact, I remember this was in New York City. They allowed you to smoke at your desk.
Wow. And New York City, too, because they were one of the first to sort of ban it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's that's
mid-'80s.
Yeah, truthfully, pensions were the first of all of those things to go, right?
Yeah,
so pensions
absolutely.
started falling out while you could still smoke at your desk. So the fact that you had a pension sort of puts an interesting timestamp on it. Let alone that it matured.
Exactly. Yeah, I'll be 53 this year, so I'm not old enough to collect it yet, but apparently it's there for me.
It's ready. Yeah,
there you go.
Good. So now you just need them to keep existing for 10 years. No more guarantees of that anyway.
Exactly. Tell me something that you wish you had started earlier.
I mean, I already told you about my jujitsu hobby, so I definitely wish I would have started that early. So I did what a lot of people do when they're trying to build up kind of a thought leader persona, a personal brand, whatever you want to call it, which is, I had the gig that made the money and worked in the pharmaceutical industry I started my podcast, started the blog, started writing for other sites, even as I was in that, which created a couple uncomfortable years of sort of trying to hide my passion from my employer and trying to hide my employer from my passion.
Yes.
And, I did it and it was great, but really like the whole reason I did it was so that I could afford a newer model car and a slightly bigger house and a bunch of things that really, I don't know, I shouldn't have been so into. So when I made the leap, I went back to grad school. I took a job as an instructor at a school. So I basically cut my income in half to start down that path. And really, I don't know what I was afraid of. It kind of worked out in the end. We stopped eating out and going on dates at really nice restaurants and just went to kind of nice restaurants. Like it all worked out. I'm not sure what I was so afraid of. So I definitely wish I would have made that a leap sooner, which is kind of weird for me to say because I'm on the younger end and I'm still kicking myself that I haven't been able to do as much as I want to do because I didn't start until later than I should have started. And really that speaks to the problems of comparing your path to other people's paths to begin with. But yeah, that's probably the other thing. I would have taken the leap, would have left that and gone after the passion project much sooner.
Interesting. You talk about the comparison model there. Out of what do we have? 7 billion people on the planet. We never ever compare ourselves to the 6 billion that would die to have our situation.
Oh, totally. I tell my students within like the first week that every single one of you won the birth lottery. Right?
Absolutely.
And what I mean by that is most of them are Americans, but even if they're not, they found a way to be able to come to a pretty good university in a whole other country, right? So automatically, even in wherever they're from, they still won the birth lottery, and that's kind of start from that position, right? That everything you have is that result of yes, it's a result of hard work, but it's also a result of you need to have gratitude to the idea that you won the birth lottery. I remember I was listening about a week ago to an interview with Seth Godin, and they asked him that. One of the questions they asked him was if you had to reproduce, if you had to throw everything you've done out and start again from scratch, what would you do to reproduce your success? And basically the first thing out of his mouth was, well, let's be honest. I got really lucky. I wrote a blog every day, but lots of people did that and you've never heard of some of them. And I wrote this book, but lots of people did that and you've never heard of them, right? So I love that he starts from this idea of gratitude for the fact that the dice rolled the right way. Granted, he had to roll them a lot of times, but they rolled the right way at the right time.
Yeah, I have a core belief that life happens for me, not to me. And no matter what comes my way, maybe that's exactly the way it's supposed to look. And I'm grateful every day. And speaking of which, core values. We all have ones that support us. What are some of your core values and beliefs?
Yeah, so through my 20s, they were a lot of sort of bright sounding ones. So, personal responsibility and effort and a growth mindset and continuous improvement or Kaizen, those type of things. And then actually when I had kids, I added what is probably the most important core value that I have, which is it's the word Havel, actually, which is a Hebrew word. It comes from my favorite book in the scriptures is Ecclesiastes, which is the most depressing book if you've ever read it, right? Because it's all about how everything is meaningless, right? And this word meaningless in it is this word Havel. And when you dive into it, it doesn't actually mean without meaning. What it means is that everything is temporary, everything is transient, everything is like a vapor. It's here now and then it's gone. And that doesn't mean that there's no meaning to it. It means enjoy it, savor it, but don't get too attached to it because it's leaving one day, right? And like you said, you have 2 kids. Having kids is a huge reminder of your mortality and also how temporary their being with you is. Enjoy it now. It may not last forever. And if you don't enjoy it now, you're going to be looking back and going, oh man, I remember the good old days when. I hope, truthfully, I try and live my life such that I never remember the good old days because I'm too busy savoring the days I have right now.
Nice. I like that. Tell us about an epic failure.
You mean besides picking the total wrong job and being utterly miserable?
Oh, yeah. That's not epic. You have more of an epic one than
right?
that. I can loan you some of mine.
Yeah, I know, right? The one that comes to mind is when I was early on, pre either book, began to write for some sites, had a podcast. I got an email from a speaker bureau who will remain nameless for reasons you'll find out soon. I got an email from a speaker bureau. It was essentially like, hey, we checked out some of your stuff. You said that you're a speaker. Awesome. We want to talk about maybe representing you. Can you send us a description of all of your talks and your rate sheet? Now, rate sheet is actually kind of an outdated term for like, okay, what do you charge for a keynote? What do you charge for a half day? Whatever. And I got that at maybe 4:00 in the afternoon, and I canceled like the whole rest of my day because I wanted to present this thing perfect, right? This beautiful, amazing thing. So wrote up all these descriptions, had like images to go with each description. I mean, basically like I built a website as a PDF to send to them to try and impress them. But my rates, because I didn't know any better, were pretty terrible, right? They were really low, in other words. And I sent it off to them at about 8:00 the next morning. I mean, I won't say I pulled an all-nighter, but I definitely should have gone to bed at some point, and I didn't. Definitely was not able to wake up at 4:59 that morning. And I sent it off to them. To date, I have never heard back from them. I probably won't because I tell this story now, and they know who they are. But I never heard back from them. Just no response to that email whatsoever, which is really mean. As I have gotten older and gotten wiser, I sort of realized what happened, which was that I was kind of being naive to think that they would be interested in somebody who didn't have that sort of experience to command that kind of higher rate, et cetera. I mean, they're looking for a rate they can get a commission off of, and mine were so low it wasn't really worth their time and effort. And I didn't really understand that. I've forgiven myself, but it definitely hurt to just not even hear back from somebody who initially pitched them as like, this is the business partner you've been waiting for. But I'm okay with it. Like I realized that what I needed was a longer runway. What I needed was more time to keep working at stuff. A few years later, I'm talking with my literary agent, getting ready to publish this next book. No promise really that I'm going to be anything. I took the exact same approach with a different group. It's the bureau that I'm still represented by, and they bid. And Tom Nielsen, who's my agent, basically said like, okay, we'll give it a shot. We'll see what works. And I've been with him forever and will be with him as long as he has a bureau because he bet on me when this other one said, oh, we're interested, and then just never really responded, right? And just shut me up, and it was a colossal sort of failure. I believe in being insanely loyal to the people that saw you as an undervalued asset, and he's definitely one of them. And so I appreciate that. I appreciate it more because I had that colossal failure of trying to talk the first one into working with me.
Interesting. What's your biggest weakness? We know about the strengths.
I like food. That's probably a big one. Honestly, I say the whole thing about priorities and all that kind of stuff, but one of my, and this is going to sound like a stupid job interview answer, I know, but one of mine is that I have my priorities, and for some reason I can still end up kicking myself because I didn't do a certain thing or I haven't gotten to a certain point, right? So I'll give you a great example of this. I was maybe 2 years ago, I was doing a series of video interviews that I was releasing, and I was interviewing a lot of people who I really admire, some who have become friends, et cetera. And I did this great interview with Daniel Pink. And Daniel Pink has been he's an intellectual hero of mine who also was nice enough to respond to my emails and actually even like schedule phone calls and interviews when I want to talk to him for my show or even just want to talk to him. So he's a super nice guy in that regard. And we're doing this whole thing, and then we're talking about something, and we finish up the interview, and we're talking about, I don't even remember, and I just remember saying like, yeah, but you've gotten this, and you've done this, and you've done this, and he just goes, hold on. I've been doing this for 20 years. You've been doing it for 2. Give yourself a longer runway, right? And so that's probably my biggest weakness is that I want to fly higher without actually laying out enough runway. And like I said, I know that sounds like the total like job interview thing, but it's true because it creates a lot of mental angst that plays around with, am I prioritizing things right? Or do I need to give more time to this or that or whatever? And I have to remind myself that like, no, I decided at the beginning of the year that this is what my priorities are. I'll reevaluate again at the end of this year based on what we want to do. But for now, like I've got to trust this process. And it's a hard thing to do.
Yeah, but I find that over and over again with peak performers, it's I want the results now, and they're just willing to do whatever it takes to just do it, even if it's not reasonable. They're unreasonable people.
No, I mean, I'd agree with you. I don't know that I've ever met. I'm actually still so gracious that you would label me with that peak performer title. I guess I'm on the show, so that counts.
Look, you wrote everything that you're doing. All we have to do is look around ourselves. Go ahead.
Yeah, but I've really never met one that doesn't embody that sort of balancing that tension between wanting to have achieved more and needing to remind yourself to have gratitude for what you have achieved. I think the tension and the more is what keeps you going, and that's great, but the gratitude is what keeps you from burning out. And some people screw up that balance.
Yes.
And I run the risk of doing that from time to time. But it's not that you just have to, or those yogis are wrong. You also need the dissatisfaction with where you're at and the desire to see more to keep you driven. You just need to balance it with the gratitude so you don't burn out.
Yeah. And it's very easy to get success without fulfillment. And for me, I believe that the fulfillment comes with the gratitude. When I'm grateful for what I have, and I'm serious, I'm grateful every day, and I want more. I want to give more. I want to be more. I want to do more. I want to give more. And that drives me. But I'm so thankful for what I have right now, and I wouldn't change a thing. So yeah. I think the two coexist.
Yeah, no, I would totally agree with you. And they keep each other. I mean, it's sort of like this is a weird analogy, but it's sort of like our relationship to our moon, right? We keep it in terms of Earth, right? We both sort of balance each other out, and we both benefit from being in the gravitational field of each other. It's the same way with gratitude and drive. They are forces that need to be kept in check, and in each other's gravitational pull, you spin one off and the whole thing will mess up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So as an author, why did you need to write the two books that you wrote? And why were you the author to write them?
So part of it is let me answer the first question. Why did I need to write, period, and then or question mark, and then we'll do the second one. This is something, I believe that you really can look back into childhood and find sort of cues. And this is something that has sort of always been there. I mean, I made the decision and made college choices based on, as a teenager, knowing I wanted to be a writer. But it turns out you can go further than that, right? My parents got divorced, moved out of our childhood home, and so we had to dig through a bunch of different stuff. And I found a thing from like second grade. I'm actually looking for it because it's somewhere in my office, but I can't find it. Second grade, and it was called My Be a Writer book. And it was this book about, like, we all had to write a book about our dream, and for some reason that was mine. So that's part of it, is just that natural desire to write. The subject that I write in is I blend storytelling and social science. So your Dan Pinks, Malcolm Gladwell's, Chip and Dan Heath, that's the genre that I was fascinated with, to the point where I kind of just couldn't take it anymore and said, I want to do this. So that's why I wrote sort of those books. The Myth of Creativity is an attempt to blend storytelling and the science of creativity into something that people can find useful. Under New Management is the same thing. It's an attempt to explain all of those sort of crazy sounding company policies through social science and organizational psychology research. Why am I the best person to write them? I mean, out of a sense of sort of narcissism, I'll tell you that I am, but I think a lot of people can, just other people haven't. I don't know that, I don't believe in purely original ideas being tied to someone. I'm sure someone else has had the idea to write a book about crazy business practices and the psych behind why they work. I'm sure that somebody else has had the idea to write a book about the faulty stories we talk about with creativity. I just happen to be the one who sort of did, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, no, it makes total sense.
And the process of doing is what qualified me and gave me the experience and all that to do. There's nothing that gave me the qualification before I started it. It's afterwards that I went through that process of 2 years of researching and writing it and studying it, to the point where, I'll say in those particular books, I probably know those two subjects better than most because I've spent so much of that time. But at the beginning of that 2-year process, nothing really qualified me more than anybody else. I just did the work.
So I guess my question is, why those topics? Was there something that just ate at you or drove you or intrigued you?
So I follow my fascination. I follow questions, right? So to me, with the first one, it was this idea of learning, being in a grad school class around the psychology of creativity and innovation, and sort of just wondering, okay, well, why do so many people say other stuff if this is what we know? And so that's the trajectory. That was the question that sort of set it up. And then really the second book was just a fascination with, well, wait a minute, why are companies that pay people to quit having more engaged employees? You think people would try and get hired just to leave, right? So why does that work? So it really starts from questions. And even, I mean, I'm working on the next book. We've already signed a contract on it, and it was based on this idea that in both books, I found myself writing about certain aspects of how humans form connections and social networks and all that sort of thing. And so again, it's just a fascination with, this is something that has caught my attention and won't let me go. So I might as well just kind of keep following it until I've mastered it.
It's excellent. And I asked that also for a personal reason as well. I'm in the process of writing a book as well, and I never thought I'd be an author. I had no plans, no dreams. That just wasn't part of what I saw myself doing. Yeah. But I stumbled upon something that I struggled with for years and years, and that was execution. How do you get things done? And what separates those that get things done and those that don't? And that question drove me for literally 16 years because I struggled with it. And when I finally figured it out for myself, I wanted to tell the world. And that's my drive behind it. So I was just curious.
I mean, a book is a master's degree, right? A book is a master's program. It's a 2-year-long process where you get a thesis-sized document at the end of it. And what I mean by that isn't that like everyone who's ever written a book deserves an honorary master's degree. But what I mean is you don't go to grad school to study a subject unless you're so fascinated with it that you can keep up that passion for 2 years. And the same thing with a book. It's going to be a long process. And 2 years is just to writing it. Then you've got another year and a half, 2 years of promoting it, maybe more depending on how long it takes you to get fascinated with another subject. So this is something you're going to have to be fascinated with for a really long period of time. I mean, matter of fact, like so most of the time I talk about Under New Management, the second book right now. But in June, I went and gave the first talk I'd given in probably 6 months on the old book, on The Myths of Creativity. And I remember walking off the stage really, really energized. And it was like, I forgot how much I like to talk about this, right?
Yes.
And you need that. Otherwise, you're never going to be able to finish the master's program.
Yeah, and it's funny because I was going through some files and I literally found some notebooks that were 10, 11 years old. And they had the start of a book in it. Yeah, and I had notes in there, and it wasn't complete. It was kind of funny looking back there. It's like I had pieces of the puzzle, but other pieces were missing, and I had no idea what they were.
Yeah,
so
totally.
It was fun to find those documents. Every peak performer that has ever lived or will live does one thing extremely well. They know how to take their ideas and execute on them. Ideas and knowledge are not power, but the ability to execute on them, that is real power. If you consider yourself a peak performer and really want to take your game to the next level and truly master the science of execution, I would like to send you some information about our upcoming event, Business Execution Summit. Simply take your phone and text the word BE Summit, one word, to 41411. And I'll send you some additional information on how to master the most important skill you will ever acquire for your life or your business. That concludes part 2 of our interview with David Burkus. Please tune in later this week for the conclusion of the interview. Thank you for listening. If you haven't already done so, please head over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. Also, please share this with family, friends, coworkers, or anyone that could benefit from this information. To make it very easy to share these episodes, simply go to my Facebook page, Thor Conklin, click on the episode that you want to share, and you can post it to your timeline. You just might be helping one of your friends on Facebook by sharing it on your page. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Thor Conklin. The website is thorconklin.com. The email is info@thorconklin. While at the website, please sign up for our weekly newsletter with additional tricks, tips, tools, and psychology on how to be a peak performer. Remember, these episodes are anywhere between 6 and 35 minutes and are meant to be consumed during dot time doing other things. Until tomorrow, have an absolutely amazing day.